With our economy under threat from abroad, Canadians have made a choice to focus on what we can control. You are choosing to put your hard-earned dollars behind Canadian businesses and Canadian workers. Canada's new government is doing the same with our new Buy Canadian policy. We're on a mission to build big, from millions of homes that will improve affordability to major projects that will transform our economy, to the new military hardware that will protect Canadians and our sovereignty.
That's a clip from a video released on Prime Minister Mark Carney's social media channels yesterday morning. It was posted not long after U.S. President Donald Trump launched a new tariff threat against Canada, in which he referred to Carney as, quote, governor, the first time he's done so with this prime minister. So what are the political implications of Trump's latest threat, particularly ahead of the return of the House of Commons tomorrow? Here to weigh in is our Sunday strategy session. Kathleen Monk is former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. James Moore is a former Conservative cabinet minister. And Scott Reid is a former communications director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hi, everybody. Good to see you on this Sunday. I appreciate you making the time. Scott, I'll start with you. The Prime Minister stopped to talk to reporters today, didn't engage too much on any communications with Trump, just kind of downplayed actually how significant whatever happened with China was. What does that tell you, and how big of a deal do you think this is politically for him?
Well, it's significant, but I thought the Prime Minister's tone was bang on and appropriate, because look, Donald Trump is a presidential equivalent of a metal spoon in the microwave these days. He's sparking and lighting up all over the place. It's not just Canada. He unloaded 70 true social postings. So he's lashing out at everyone. We have to take serious his posting and his suggestion that he may oppose a 100% across-the-board tariffs, but I'm not sure that it is a serious threat. And in that context, taking a bit of time, pointing out that Canada is not negotiating a free trade agreement with China, as Minister LeBlanc did, pointing out, as the Prime Minister did, that there would be severe downsides to Donald Trump actually taking that kind of action. Imagine the increase in the price of gas at the pump for Americans. So taking a breath, not panicking, just being steady and sensible seems to me to be the right play at this moment, particularly as you look at the broader context with how Donald Trump is conducting himself, the isolation he's experiencing internationally, and the divisions he's provoking domestically.
Yeah, it's interesting because on the face of it, when you see a threat like that from a U.S. president, James, to Scott's point, you have to take it seriously. At the same time, we're just a few months, a few weeks out from the last tariff threat of an additional 10% that Trump levied against us, which was supposed to come because of that Ronald Reagan ad, and then was never spoken of again.
An important point that you just made. Donald Trump has threatened 3 times more tariffs than he's actually ever imposed. So the keep calm, carry on prose of the Prime Minister is the appropriate response. You can't react to everything Donald Trump says and does, but you do have to respond as a nation. And the Prime Minister obviously had a very good moment in Davos, to the point where you have Pierre Poilievre, for the first time, I think, ever praising a sitting Liberal Prime Minister, because Pierre Poilievre recognizes the moment, and the Prime Minister seems to recognize the moment coming out of his cabinet retreat, that it's time to pivot and move forward and not be disappointed, be internally angry, be publicly stoic. And then when Parliament comes back, and as we move forward, there's never been a bigger barn door open for the Prime Minister of this country, with a union of solidarity behind him that is nonpartisan, to go forward and do big things and be significant about that. The Super Bowl is around the corner, a couple weeks away. We're supposed to have these sort of installments of major projects across the country. There's a moment here for the Prime Minister to do something really significant and show Canadians that we are united and we're doing big things as a country.
It will be a really interesting, it feels like, Kathleen, return to Parliament tomorrow for exactly the reason that James lays out. The opportunity for the government is massive. To the point about Pierre Poilievre, there's a ton of rhetoric from the opposition, including the Conservatives, actually, at this moment, about advancing those priorities together, which is not something, to be honest, that on any side you normally hear ahead of a return to Parliament, at least not in the last little while.
And it speaks to the change in tone and what's needed, right? And that tone shift for the Conservatives is remarkable, that they're willing to cooperate, possibly do joint negotiations with the U.S. But what I found interesting from this morning and the Prime Minister was really the pushback that he got from one journalist. He got basically one question put to him this morning, and it was, have you mortgaged Canadians' affordability because you've angered Trump. And bringing it back to those key issues that Canadians care about like how people are struggling day to day. And Wab Kinew said it best in your best last interview, which was just like, he's got to do all of the things at all the time, Prime Minister Carney. He's got to deal with the affordability threats, the political threats, and the electoral instability that the minority is, and then also deal with the geopolitical stuff. But I think what was fascinating is that he did say this morning, the Prime Minister, that there would be some affordability measures coming soon. So what are they? Are they on the agenda? How does he deal with the Conservatives' pushback on affordability, immigration, crime? Can he solve those political challenges so if there is an election, the Liberals are poised to do better or at least answer that big question of affordability on the problem? We've seen them cut taxes in the past. Will they do more in the future?
Yeah, to what degree, Scott, do you think there needs to be like something tangible on that front? I know we're all consumed at this sort of esoteric level with everything going on with the United States and moral clarity and all those things, but like people are worried about the same thing they were worried about last year and the year before, a lack of affordability.
I'm not sure now's the exact moment where we need to just, stencil a check and send it to every household. I don't know that that's the appropriate response. I think giving voice to the concerns that people have, making certain that Canadians don't watch the Prime Minister see how he's involved in these discussions, both internationally and across the border with Donald Trump, and worry that maybe the Prime Minister and the government have forgotten about the daily struggles that people are experiencing. You've got to make certain that you address that. You've got to make certain that you connect all of this instability that stems from Trump with the challenges that people are feeling and with your policy remedies. But I don't know that they need to do something in the immediate term, again, in a panicky way. And that really is not the recipe the Prime Minister tends to follow. I think more important than anything, we shouldn't underestimate the connection that Canadians themselves make between Donald Trump's erraticism and their own economic situation. I do think Canadians lay this at the feet of Donald Trump, and that's why it was smart of Pierre Poilievre to ignore all those conservatives who are jamming the pages of the National Post with numbskull commentary, trying to align themselves and, say, actually Trump's right. That is not the play that Pierre Poilievre supported. He knows that that is electoral disaster, and instead saying we got to chart a similar course.
I've got 30 seconds left for both, 30 seconds for James and 30 seconds for Kathleen. James, what do you think about that?
I think that's exactly right. One of the reasons Donald Trump's domestic support is cratering is because he's talking about golden domes and Greenland and Nobel Prizes. The Prime Minister of this country and Pierre Poilievre, who aspires to be the Prime Minister of this country, needs to focus on the things that Canadians care about and not get sidetracked. The difference between us and the United States is that the cost of living crisis, if you're an auto worker, Donald Trump is your cost of living crisis because he's threatening your job. So these two things are not actually mutually exclusive. They're combined. If you farm canola on the prairies, access to that Chinese market is a job issue and it is a cost of living issue. So focus on the horizon. Keep selling products to the world. Don't get bullied by Donald Trump. Canada first. That should be the ethos for everybody.
I'll crystallize it in one line. Americans are watching as President Trump chooses to kidnap and kill his own citizens as opposed to lowering prices. Canadians are watching that in horror and want our government to chart a new path and a new way forward.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Guys, thanks very much for making the time in the conversation. Kathleen Monk, Scott Reed, and James Moore, our Sunday strategy session.